A man is ambushed in his home in the dead of night.
The victim was lying face down in front of the stereo.
He had been shot 3 times, once in the back and twice in the head.
The light bulbs in the house had been unscrewed, so he was in total darkness, ambushed and killed right there in his own living room.
Faced with a puzzling crime scene, investigators turn to the victim's personal life.
They thought that at one point that he had another girlfriend.
When was the last time you knew of him having an affair?
Here's having one now.
Was this a spurned lover or a love triangle?
Or maybe his wife was trying to throw them off her trail and maybe pointing the finger at the girlfriend.
They just didn't have any real evidence at that time.
It takes investigators years and multiple sting operations to uncover the truth and bring a cold-blooded mastermind to justice.
They asked her if she would wear a wire and go have a conversation.
When I found out they had planned this, it was jaw-dropping.
It was like betrayal.
She had taken out a couple of life insurance policies worth $120,000.
To her, he was worth more dead than alive.
Vero Beach, Florida is usually a quiet, family-oriented community. But on March 24th, 1991, while most are sound asleep, a late-night patrol officer responds to a complaint made against a resident of a local trailer park.
When the call originally came in, it came in as just a noise complaint, something that we work a lot of.
Patrolman responded to that 911 call, and he arrived at the trailer, heard a very loud stereo blaring from the residence.
It's about 4 a.m. Could be a party, could be somebody who doesn't realize how loud their music is.
The officer goes into the trailer, tried to turn on the lights would not come on. So he had to use his flashlight.
The trailer appeared to have been ransacked. There were papers strewn everywhere, drawers were open, things were turned over.
As the officer steps further into the room, he makes a grisly discovery.
There was a subject laying on the ground in a pool of blood, a pack of cigarettes laying next to him. It appeared as though somebody possibly shot him.
The officer immediately secures the trailer and calls for backup. When homicide investigators arrive, they begin processing the scene for evidence.
The victim was lying in front of the stereo. It appeared that the victim had just arrived home because he was dressed in his work clothes and still had his car keys near him.
It was determined he had been shot 3 times, once in the back and twice in the head.
There was a speaker moved near the entrance where our victim entered the door. It was consistent with somebody that was hiding directly behind the door.
A driver's license in the victim's wallet matches the address and identifies him as 30-year-old Alan Pfeiffer.
You have somebody who is deceased in their own house and somebody has ransacked it. Your first impression would be, this is a robbery or a burglary gone bad. But his wallet was still there, his keys were still there, his car was still there. The fact that there was no forced entry or appearance of any forced entry raised the suspicions of the police immediately.
When detectives discover why the lights aren't working, it's another sign that Alan stumbled into a trap.
The light bulbs in the house had been unscrewed, so even if Alan Pfeiffer came into the house and tried to turn on the lights, he wasn't going to be able to. So he was in total darkness and was ambushed and killed right there in his own living room.
Evidence of a woman's belongings inside the home make it clear that Alan does not live alone. And in the driveway outside are 2 cars, a Pontiac Trans Am and a bright red Pontiac Fiero.
When our officers ran the plates of the vehicles that were at the residence, one of the vehicles belonged to Alan Pfeiffer, the other vehicle belonged to Alan's wife, Connie Pfeiffer. Now we're getting really concerned about where is she at?
Has something happened to her? Has somebody hurt her? Has somebody taken her away? We don't know. At that point, the police are trying to find out exactly what was going on in Alan Pfeiffer's life.
The list of questions that investigators had was lengthy. Did Alan have any enemies? Is there anybody that they owed money to? Where's Alan's wife?
Alan Frederick Pfeiffer was originally from Norfolk, Virginia. He was born May 19, 1960, the oldest of 2 children raised by Judith and Ronald Pfeiffer.
Alan was a year and 15 days older than me. We were both born in Norfolk, Virginia, because our biological father was in the Navy. And then he and my mom got divorced, and Mom brought Alan and I back here to Michigan, where she was from.
Alan and his sister did most of their growing up in the lakefront town of Pinconning, Michigan. After their mother remarried, they gained a younger brother.
The dynamic of it is what you would normally think of a family. It was brothers and sisters. We poked at each other, we argued, we cared for each other. Alan was very independent on his own. He went and he hunted. He didn't do a lot of fishing or anything like that, but he was an outdoorsman.
As he grew older, Alan discovered his true passion didn't lie in the wilderness, but in his stepfather's garage.
Alan seemed to be very mechanically inclined. Working on his car was one of his big things he really enjoyed.
He always spoke about wanting to get a Pontiac Trans Am, and he was so proud of it. When he finally got it, it was a 1980 Pontiac Trans Am. He took out the automatic transmission, he put the 4-speed Pontiac transmission into it. That was his pride and joy.
The sports car was also Alan's ticket out of rural Michigan.
Alan left home when he was 17. Him and my stepdad were having issues, and he just thought he'd be better off on his own.
Eager to escape the harsh winters, Alan headed south to sunny Vero Beach, Florida. To make ends meet, he took a job at an electronics store.
He could carry himself and be intimidating. So when he would do repossessions, he really did not have a lot of issues getting any property back.
He got himself established. He was making pretty good money, and he was enjoying the warmer weather. He was doing well for himself down there.
By the mid-'80s, Alan was living a fairly comfortable life, and he met a young woman named Connie Evers to share it with.
The first time I met Connie, she seemed like a really nice lady. She was very approachable. She made you feel comfortable around her. She had a southern thing to her.
Connie had 2 boys from a previous relationship. The 2 boys did not live with them, but I know he spent time with those boys. Alan seemed to be more mature, more settled. They were happy. Their life was going good.
In 1986, Alan and Connie decided to get married.
You could see that it's love. I mean, the holding hands and feeding each other cake. They were really very happy.
But only 5 years later, This picture-perfect family has been torn apart by violence. A vicious shooting has left Alan dead on his living room floor. And his wife and children are nowhere to be found.
The house had been ransacked. Connie wasn't there. Obviously, there had been a struggle because there's a dead body in the living room. So there's always a concern that perhaps there's another victim.
Detectives notify state law enforcement to be on the lookout for Connie while they begin their investigation into Alan's death.
After talking to the neighbors, we knew what time approximately Alan Pfeiffer got home. Some people heard gunshots. The music was still on. The music stayed on until 4 o'clock in the morning until finally somebody called in.
The medical examiner's office removed the body for an autopsy. When the ballistics examiner looked at the bullets removed from the victim's body, he determined that they were .38 caliber.
The murder weapon was not found inside the trailer or outside of the trailer.
The police obviously are looking at this and they're like, this doesn't add up. This was a trap set up for Alan Pfeiffer. What was the motive?
The neighbors shared with our detectives that they heard many fights between Connie and Alan. They expected marital problems, and that they thought that at one point that Mr. Pfeiffer had another girlfriend.
The question arose, was this a spurned lover or a love triangle? And the biggest question for the police is, where's Connie Pfeiffer?
Coming up, investigators take a closer look at Alan and Connie's marriage.
They weren't in a good place in their marriage.
And discover there was another woman with a possible motive.
I heard an argument they had last week. She has the nerve to open the door and walk in and start causing a scene.
As the investigation into the shooting death of Alan Pfeiffer continues, detectives' concerns for his missing wife and children grow.
As a married couple, at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. when they show up there, why isn't Connie in the trailer? Is something happened to her? Is she somewhere in the near vicinity, lying dead? They need to track her down.
The police began to contact her mother and her brother, who in turn try to reach her.
Connie's loved ones tell investigators they don't know where she is. Alan's family say they haven't been in contact with Connie either, and they are stunned when they're told what's happened.
It was on a Sunday. We were just getting ready to go to church. My mom answered the phone. All I can remember is my mother's, I don't know, I can't even say shock. You don't know how to react to news that you would never expect to get.
I remember Mom, she telling me, she said, Cheryl, you gotta sit down. And then when she said Alan had been killed, I wasn't prepared for that. That was hard.
When asked about the rumored affair, family members say Connie had mentioned it previously, but they thought the couple had moved past it.
They never gave any indication that there were issues.
Nothing was out of the ordinary. We didn't seem to have any problems. But Alan was also kind of a private man. If he was unhappy, he hid it.
The one person who might be able to shed some light on the situation is Connie, but investigators are unable to track her down. Just as they are beginning to suspect the worst, Connie surprises everyone.
At 1:16, I believe, in the afternoon on the 24th, Mom showed up with Connie at the police department.
Connie was very distraught. She was crying.
She had just lost her husband. It was as much of a shock to her as it was to us.
They ask her, where were you? Where have you been? She indicates that she took her kids to her mother's where they were staying. And then she had spent the evening at the fair, and she had stayed with some friends.
Connie says she came as soon as she got the news of Alan's death. But now that police know she isn't a victim, they have to rule her out as a suspect.
Being, of course, that you weren't there and we had such a hard time locating you, I do need to tell you that you are a suspect at this time. That's why we're here to talk to you now.
Connie told investigators that she was at the county fair with 3 of her friends, Paul Evans, Sarah Thomas, and Donna Waddell. Investigators located all 3 of those individuals.
They talked with Sarah Thomas, and they talked with Donna Waddell, and they talked with Paul Evans, and everything did seem to mesh at that point.
When detectives ask Connie why she didn't come home that night, she says it was because she was afraid.
Why were you scared to go home Saturday?
Because I had been out drinking and I was out late and I was disobeying orders.
What did Alan order you to do?
You're supposed to do things his way if he gets mad and stuff like that.
Connie tells investigators that she and Alan were married, but it wasn't a good relationship. They weren't in a good place in their marriage.
Alan's attitude lately?
It fluctuated. Sometimes he would be okay, and there were days when he was meaner to where it was actually like he wanted to hurt me. Not physically, but just out of nowhere, he would just start saying mean, cruel things to try and hurt my feelings.
Connie also confirms that Alan has had several affairs over the years they've been married.
When was the last time you knew of him having an affair?
He was having one now.
You knew he was still having one now?
Yeah. I caught him a month or 2 ago, and he led me to believe that it was finished.
According to Connie, Alan's girlfriend wouldn't take no for an answer.
I heard an argument they had last week because she found out where we lived. She has the nerve to open the door and walk in and start causing a scene and causing him names, and he shoved her back out the door and he told her not to bother him anymore, quit coming around him, and stay away from the house and everything else. Because he told me he wanted to try again, make things work and everything else.
What's her name?
June.
For investigators, Connie's interview points to new and concerning theories.
One of the thoughts that you have is maybe a jealous girlfriend possibly harmed him, or maybe Connie Pfeiffer was trying to throw them off her trail and maybe pointing the finger at the girlfriend. So at this point, we have to find June and try to verify her whereabouts, see what she had to say.
After concluding their interview with Connie Pfeiffer and confirming her alibi, detectives investigating Alan Pfeiffer's murder now have more than one woman from Alan's life on their radar.
The investigators certainly had a suspicion that Connie was somehow involved, but they didn't have any evidence that she was involved because her alibi checked out.
investigators waste no time in tracking down her husband's latest lover. She claims Alan never tried to break up with her.
Investigators went and found June, and they spoke to her about the relationship. She said that they'd been seeing each other for a while and that she wanted Alan to leave Connie, but that she would never harm him whatsoever. June had an alibi that night. She was at work. The investigators were able to rule her out.
According to June, if anyone had a reason to kill Alan, it was Connie.
June provided a lot of background information as far as what was going on between Connie and Alan. That he and Connie were really on the outs and they were about ready to break up and divorce. Things had gotten so bad that Alan had basically given her an ultimatum, you're out in a week. Connie had to be in a panic at this point. Connie had 2 children from a previous relationship. She was working a small job in which she was not making a lot of money. So she was completely dependent upon Alan Pfeiffer. She couldn't make it on her own.
When investigators looked into Connie's background, she didn't really have a criminal history. But they did learn that she and Alan had taken out a couple of life insurance policies worth $120,000 on Alan's life about a month before the murder.
1991, $120,000 was a lot of money.
By itself, the life insurance policy isn't proof of anything, but detectives find the terms of the contract interesting.
It was learned that, they had to be married for her to collect insurance. That's an aha moment. It really is.
If she divorced Alan, she wouldn't have anything.
To homicide investigators, it's a compelling motive. But they can't prove Connie had anything to do with Alan's murder.
They had reasons to believe that she may have been involved, but they just didn't have any real evidence at that time.
We can't break her alibi.
She's got 3 friends that are all saying basically the same story. Her mother's given the same story, and she's sticking to exactly what she's saying.
Despite their suspicions, police have to consider the possibility that neither Alan's wife nor his girlfriend are responsible for his death. They spend the next several months searching for other suspects.
We spend hundreds of hours trying to get leads, looking at things evidence-wise to see maybe there's a connection, to try to come up with something to locate who could have possibly done this.
We had talked to all the neighbors. We had talked to all the family members. We had talked to co-workers. We had talked to her alibi. We had talked to anybody on the periphery that we could find.
There was just nothing solid enough for us to go forward on.
As the months turn into years, investigators fight to keep the investigation alive.
As the investigation had stalled, Connie had taken her proceeds from her life insurance policy and moved to Ocala, several hours away, and bought a large piece of property and was living there.
We never forgot about the case, and it was always on our minds. We wanted to bring justice.
We would have family members call in, asking us if anything else has happened.
In the 6 years that was going on, what I thought is it was a robbery. Maybe they'll catch him, maybe they won't.
In 1997, 6 years after Alan was gunned down in his home, investigators' persistence finally pays off when a witness comes forward and blows the case wide open.
She was the one who was going to finally tell the truth.
Coming up, investigators learn the details of a diabolical murder plot.
The only word that comes to my mind is cold.
And the alleged mastermind is a woman driven by greed and desperation.
She could not take the idea of being broke again, so she decided to take it all.
Six years after Alan Pfeiffer's murder, one of the three friends who'd corroborated his wife's alibi has come to police to make a shocking confession.
The first real break in the case was when Sarah Thomas confessed to her involvement and the truth of what had happened. Sarah's conscience got to her. She came forward because she wanted to get that weight off of her shoulders.
Appreciate you coming down, Sarah.
Can I ask you a question before I go on? Am I going to get in trouble for anything I say?
No, you're here voluntarily. You're not under arrest.
According to Sarah, the rumors of an impending divorce between Alan and Connie were true.
Something was wrong with their relationship.
Where did you hear this from?
From Paul.
That she was dating?
Yeah.
We were able to determine that Alan Pfeiffer wasn't the only one having an affair, that Connie had also had affairs.
She said that he and Connie were really on the outs and they were about ready to break up and divorce.
We knew she was making $175 a week. She didn't even own the car that she drove. She was going to be left with nothing once she didn't have Alan.
Based on Sarah's statement, it seemed like the reality of being out on the street with her two children pushed Connie to desperation.
Sarah Thomas then begins to tell how Connie could not take the idea of being broke again, so she decided to take it all.
To her, he was worth more dead than alive.
Connie knew it would be tricky to get rid of Alan and collect the insurance by herself. So she enlisted the aid of her friends.
Sarah and Paul Evans were boyfriend and girlfriend.
You were living with Paul and Donna at the time.
They met Connie about 3 months before the homicide and became friends with her.
Sarah Thomas had dropped out of school. She wasn't working. So there she was living with Paul and Donna, and they were barely making it. They were barely able to pay the rent at their house.
Sarah tells investigators that Connie offered to make all of their financial problems disappear.
If he helped her out and if I didn't say anything about it, then she would be more than willing to compensate us and with stuff and money that she got back.
Once Alan was out of the way, she would have the trailer, she'd have the cars, and she'd have $120,000 in life insurance.
The plan was for Paul to shoot Alan. The problem was nobody had a gun. Donna remembered that her father had a gun that he kept hidden under his mattress. So the day of the murder, Donna and Paul went to her parents' house. Paul broke in, stole the gun, and then left.
Sarah says the plan was for Paul to carry out the murder, while the rest of them provided Connie with an alibi.
We went to the fair so we would be seen.
And of course, you could say Paul was with us, but at the same time, Paul was back at the trailer.
Right.
Donna and Sarah drove Paul back to the trailer while Connie stayed at the county fair to continue to establish that alibi.
Paul was going to hide in the trailer and kill Alan as he came in the door. In order to hide the gunshots, Paul had turned the stereo up very loud and waited.
Paul Evans ambushed Alan and shot him. He fell towards the couch, and before he could move, Paul shot him 2 more times at close range.
After the deed was done, Paul ransacked the trailer to make it look like a burglary, then made his escape.
We had a time set to go pick him back up.
What was he dressed in?
Dark clothes, black shirt and black jeans.
Later, they drove out to an area that's desolate where there's canals and threw the gun in a canal. Now we know exactly what happened. We know our shooter, and we know who hired our shooter. Connie was the mastermind behind all this. She had the most to gain. She wanted her husband gone. She was dealing with people that were quite a bit younger than her at the time. She's very influential over them.
But in a case where there's no murder weapon, there's no fingerprints, and there's no DNA, the statement of just one person may not be enough to convict somebody of a crime.
Six years after the death of Alan Pfeiffer, detectives finally have a witness who can testify to Connie Pfeiffer's role in her husband's murder, along with her alleged co-conspirators, Donna Waddell and Paul Evans. But to bring her to justice, they know they'll need more than a statement.
One of the things that stood out the most is Donna Waddell's father had a .38 caliber revolver, stolen the very same day as the homicide. I went to Mr. Waddell's house and I asked him, did you have any more ammunition from when the gun was stolen? He provides me with this ammunition. I send it down to our crime lab and they're able to determine it's the same exact ammunition that was used in the homicide.
The evidence corroborates Sarah Thomas's story and implicates her friend, Donna Waddell.
So investigators asked Sarah if she would wear a wire and go have a conversation with Donna.
Sarah agrees and convinces Donna to meet her at her house.
As an investigator, you're praying. We sit outside in our van and we listen. And we hear Sarah go inside and say, hey, listen, the cops are questioning me about this homicide again. What should I do?
Donna's like, she goes, just stick to the story. There's nothing they can do as long as we stick to the story.
If Donna didn't have anything to hide, why would she say, stick to the story? Obviously, there must be a story to stick to.
Donna's comments remain vague, but just as it appears she might not take the bait, she makes a crucial mistake.
She goes, I think about it all the time. We were so young and foolish for doing this, but we helped. Donna says that several times on the tape.
She said, I wish we had never done it.
So at this point, we arrest Donna. We bring her to the Vero Beach Police Department. Her attorney comes down. They listen to the conversation between her and Sarah and realize the jig's up.
Donna admits to her role in Alan's murder, but like Sarah, she insists Connie was the one pulling the strings.
You have two people who, years after the fact, are telling the same story.
Armed with confessions from two of Connie's co-conspirators, detectives try to get the third to flip as well.
Sarah and Paul had a relationship in the prior years. We go to his residence with Sarah wired one more time. Sarah extremely nervous because she said Paul was very dangerous and she was worried about him. It really took guts. We're in a surveillance van. We have officers on each side of this apartment complex where Paul Evans lives.
Unfortunately, Paul is much more careful than Donna.
She would ask him questions, and all that law enforcement could hear on that wire was a rustling sound. Paul was writing his answers down on a piece of paper, and then he would burn the piece of paper
She called him out at some point and says, "I'm not wired, why are you writing?" And he continued to write. He would not speak. We were worried about her safety, and at that point, we arrested Paul Evans.
Police storm the apartment and arrest Paul and charge him with first-degree murder. He's immediately brought in for questioning.
Myself and Detective Cook were in the interview. Paul Evans was dressed in all black, and he had his knees up to his chest in a curled type position, sitting up.
His demeanor was a little defiant, but also you could tell that he appeared to be like, they finally got me. He acknowledged that something did occur, but then he lawyered up. After we arrest Paul, we had to get to Connie before word spread, because we knew that somebody would contact her and let them know that the other three were arrested. I run a check from her driver's license and find out that she's living in Ocklawaha, Florida. We end up going to her residence, which was far off in a wooded area in the middle of nowhere. She looked at us as if she expected this day to happen. No emotion, no surprise. It was like, you guys finally got here. And I was like, she knew this the whole time. This day was coming.
After a 6-year investigation, Connie Pfeiffer is arrested on July 21st, 1997 for the murder of her husband, Alan.
She never confessed to anything. She immediately asked for an attorney, and then she was just taken back to the jail cell.
When I found out Connie was arrested and found out that they had planned this, it was like jaw-dropping, because it just never, ever entered my mind.
In exchange for her cooperation, Donna Waddell is offered a plea deal. Donna receives a 10-year sentence for providing the murder weapon, while Sarah escapes criminal charges altogether.
Sarah was there and aware of it, but, didn't have the active role in the murder. There wasn't enough to charge her with any crime.
We proceed to trial against Paul Evans, and he's prosecuted for the first-degree murder of Alan Pfeiffer. During his trial, every time that I would look over, he always had a little smirk on his face, like he thought it was quite amusing that he was there.
Paul was ultimately the one that pulled the trigger. He knew full well what he was doing.
Paul Evans is found guilty and sentenced to the death penalty. In 1999, Connie's trial begins. Connie's defense is that her friends planned and carried out the murder on their own because they needed the money. But when Donna Waddell takes the stand, she says all of them walked away empty-handed.
To your knowledge, did Paul Evans ever receive any payment for murdering Alan Pfeiffer?
Not that I'm aware of.
Did you?
No.
Did Sarah?
Not that I'm aware of.
When did you first become aware that someone wanted Alan Pfeiffer dead?
Connie had said that she had wanted to get rid of her husband. She wanted to have her husband killed because she couldn't divorce him, and if we would help.
Her testimony is confirmed by Sarah Thomas.
Connie had asked Donna if she knew of anybody that would kill her husband.
When you have multiple people saying essentially the same thing, that's very powerful evidence for a jury to hear. Connie was very quiet in the courtroom. You didn't hear anything from her. You didn't see any reaction.
The only word that comes to my mind is cold.
After a lengthy trial, Connie is found guilty for first-degree murder.
We sought the death penalty against Connie. So after her conviction, she did testify during the penalty phase of her trial, and that's the first time that we heard Connie speak. She didn't answer any questions about the actual murder. Instead, she focused on the alleged abuse that she suffered at the hands of Alan.
Al, if you would, explain the relationship that existed between you and Alan Pfeiffer. Was there abuse that took place in this relationship?
Yes, there was. There was the time that he took me by the hair and just kept pounding my head into the floor.
Her testimony was almost exclusively about how Alan had been a very abusive spouse to her. And so, in Connie's case, the jury recommended life.
Connie receives life in prison without the possibility of parole. But the unthinkable pain she caused continues to be felt by Alan's family.
She needs to spend the rest of her life behind bars. She took a life for no other reason than money. And there's nothing she can do to make that right.
Alan really did love his family. 30 years, robbed 30 years of our life to spend with him. It's hard to think about that part of it.
I actually have a picture of him up on my wall in my living room. And I look at it every day. He's never far from my thoughts. He's a piece of me.
The human mind is a complex landscape where the brightest aspirations of love can sometimes devolve into the darkest corridors of greed and betrayal. When we examine the annals of criminal history, we often find that the most tragic events do not originate from external threats or random acts of malice, but rather from within the very sanctuaries where individuals expect to find safety and warmth. This reality was laid bare in a quiet community on the eastern coast of Florida, where an intricate web of deception took years to unravel. The story of Alan Pfeiffer is not merely a chronicle of a life cut short, but a profound study in human psychology, the vulnerability of trust, the slow but relentless march of justice, and the ultimate triumph of truth over calculated silence. Vero Beach, Florida, has long been regarded as a peaceful, family-oriented haven, a place where the gentle rustle of palm trees and the soothing sounds of the ocean provide a backdrop to stable, hard-working lives. In the early portion of the decade of the 1990s, it was a community where residents felt secure in their homes, and the local police force spent much of their time addressing minor neighborhood disputes and routine patrols. However, the tranquility of this seaside town was permanently shattered in the early morning hours of March 24, 1991. At approximately 4:00 in the morning, a late-night patrol officer was dispatched to respond to what appeared to be a standard noise complaint at a local trailer park. For the responding officer, such a call was a routine part of the shift. Noise complaints were common, especially during the weekends when gatherings could easily run late, or residents might simply forget the hour while listening to music. As the patrolman arrived at the designated trailer, the deep, rhythmic vibrations of a very loud stereo could be heard blaring from the residence. The music was exceptionally loud for the pre-dawn hour, suggesting either a lively party or an owner who was completely oblivious to the volume. The officer approached the door, hoping to ask the occupant to turn down the sound. Upon entering the residence, the officer immediately sensed that something was amiss, attempting to flick the light switches to illuminate the room. The officer found himself in darkness as the lights refused to function. Utilizing his flashlight, the beam cut through the gloom to reveal a scene of complete disarray. The interior of the trailer appeared to have been ransacked. Papers were strewn across the floor, drawers were pulled open, and various personal belongings were overturned, indicating a chaotic search or a violent struggle. As the officer advanced further into the room, guided only by the narrow beam of his flashlight, he made a grim and unsettling discovery. A man was lying face down on the floor in front of the stereo, completely motionless. A pack of cigarettes lay on the ground nearby. It was immediately apparent that the individual had suffered fatal injuries from a firearm. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, the officer secured the premises and immediately summoned homicide investigators and backup to the scene. When the specialized investigators arrived, they began the meticulous process of analyzing the crime scene for clues. The victim was identified through the contents of his wallet as 30-year-old Alan Frederick Pfeiffer. The physical evidence suggested that Alan had only recently returned home from his job, as he was still dressed in his work clothes, and his car keys were located close to his body. An examination of his remains revealed that he had been shot 3 times, receiving 1 wound in his back and 2 to his head. The nature of the crime scene immediately raised significant questions for the investigators. The disarray of the home initially pointed to a burglary or a robbery that had escalated into violence. Yet, several key details did not align with this theory. Alan's wallet, containing his identification and cash, was left untouched. His keys and his vehicle, a prized Pontiac Trans Am parked outside, were also left behind. If a thief had broken in searching for valuables, it was highly unusual to leave such obvious items of wealth behind. Furthermore, there was no sign of forced entry. The door was undamaged, suggesting that either the perpetrator possessed a key or Alan had unwittingly let the attacker inside. The most chilling revelation came when detectives investigated why the light bulbs in the house were not functioning. Upon closer inspection, they discovered that the bulbs had been deliberately unscrewed just enough to break the electrical connection. This detail was highly telling. It meant that when Alan entered his home in the dead of night and reached for the light switches, he was plunged into immediate, total darkness. He had been completely blind to his surroundings, unable to defend himself or see his attacker. Additionally, a large speaker had been moved near the entrance where Alan entered, positioned in a manner consistent with someone hiding directly behind the door to ambush him. This was not a robbery gone wrong. It was a carefully planned, cold-blooded trap. Outside the residence, detectives noted 2 vehicles parked in the driveway. One was Alan's beloved 1980 Pontiac Trans Am, and the other was a bright red Pontiac Fiero. Registration checks revealed that the Fiero belonged to Alan's wife, Connie Pfeiffer. This discovery introduced a new wave of concern. Where was Connie? Had she also fallen victim to the perpetrator? Had she been taken against her will? The police were suddenly faced with a dual priority: finding a killer and locating a potentially endangered spouse. To understand the circumstances surrounding the tragedy, Investigators began to look deeply into the life of Alan Pfeiffer. Born on May 19, 1960, in Norfolk, Virginia, Alan was the eldest of 2 children raised by his mother, Judith, and his father. Following a divorce, his mother relocated the family back to her home state of Michigan, where Alan and his sister grew up in the quiet lakefront town of Pinconning. The family dynamic was warm and supportive, characterized by the typical playful arguments and deep affection shared among siblings. Alan developed an early reputation for independence and a love for the outdoors. He was a young man who enjoyed hunting and spending time in nature. As Alan entered his teenage years, his interests shifted from the wilderness to the mechanical world of his stepfather's garage. He possessed a natural talent for working vekep. It had his hands and understanding machinery. His ultimate goal during this period was to own a Pontiac Trans Am, a dream he realized when he acquired a 1980 model. Displaying his impressive mechanical skills, Alan personally removed the automatic transmission from the sports car and installed a 4-speed manual transmission, a modification that became his greatest source of pride. At the age of 17, seeking to establish his own path and escape the harsh Michigan winters, Alan moved south to Vero Beach, Florida. He quickly found employment at a local electronics store, where his intimidating physical presence and strong work ethic made him highly effective at repossessing property. When customers defaulted on payments, Alan successfully established himself in Florida, earning a comfortable living and enjoying the warm climate. By the mid-1980s, Alan's life seemed complete when he met Connie Evers. To external observers, Connie was a warm, approachable woman with an engaging Southern charm. She had 2 sons from a previous relationship, and although they did not reside with the couple, Alan made a concerted effort to build a relationship with them. In 1986, Alan and Connie were married. Photographs from their wedding depicted a happy, affectionate couple embarking on a promising future together. However, 5 years later, that promise was shattered. While investigators in 1991 worked tirelessly to piece together the events of that fateful March night, they struggled to find Connie. In Michigan, was notified of his passing. A conversation that brought immense shock and grief. They recounted that while they had heard minor rumors of marital difficulties, they believed the couple had resolved their issues. Alan was a private man who rarely complained, choosing to keep his personal struggles to himself. The mystery surrounding Connie's whereabouts was resolved later that afternoon when she arrived at the police department, accompanied by her mother. Connie appeared deeply distraught, weeping openly, and expressing immense shock over the loss of her husband. When questioned about her location during the night, she explained that she had taken her children to her mother's home, attended the local county fair with 3 close friends, and subsequently spent the night at a friend's residence. She provided the names of her companions, Paul Evans, Sarah Thomas, and Donna Waddle. Detectives immediately contacted these 3 individuals, and their statements perfectly matched Connie's account. With a solid alibi corroborated by 3 independent witnesses, the police could not hold Connie as a suspect. Yet, during her interview, Connie revealed that her marriage to Alan had grown deeply troubled. She described him as increasingly distant and verbally cruel, claiming that she often felt targeted by his harsh words. She also confirmed a rumor that investigators had heard from neighbors. Alan had been engaging in extramarital affairs, most notably with a woman named June. According to Connie, This mistress was persistent and refused to end the relationship, raising the possibility of a crime of passion born from a love triangle. Investigators quickly located June to verify her whereabouts. June cooperated fully, explaining that while she and Alan were indeed in a relationship, she had no hand in his demise. Crucially, June possessed a verified alibi, as she was at work during the time of the shooting. Furthermore, June provided a completely different perspective on the marriage, stating that Alan and Connie were on the verge of a divorce and that Alan had given Connie a strict deadline of 1 week to move out of the trailer. This information shifted the direction of the investigation. A divorce would have left Connie in a highly precarious financial situation. She was working a low-paying job, earning only approximately $175 a week, and was entirely dependent on Alan's income to support herself and her 2 children. If Alan divorced her, she would walk away with virtually nothing. Detectives examined the financial records of the couple. They discovered a significant detail. Just 1 month prior to the shooting, Alan and Connie had taken out 2 life insurance policies on Alan S. Life, totaling $175,000, though other records indicated the value was closer to $120,000. Under the terms of the policies, Connie could only collect the payout if they were still legally married at the time of his passing. If they divorced, the financial security she desperately needed would vanish. To investigators, this represented an incredibly powerful motive. It appeared that to Connie, Alan was worth far more deceased than alive. Despite this compelling theory, investigators faced a major obstacle. They had no physical evidence linking Connie to the crime, and her alibi remained completely intact. The 3 friends continued to stand by their story, and with no murder weapon, fingerprints, or DNA evidence, the case slowly began to stall. Weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. Connie eventually collected the life insurance proceeds and relocated several hours away to Ocala, Florida, where she purchased a large tract of land and established a new life. For 6 long years, the case remained unresolved, a painful weight on the minds of Alan's family and the dedicated detectives who refused to let his memory fade. Then, in 1997, the silence was finally broken. Sarah Thomas, one of the 3 friends who had provided Connie's alibi, walked into the police station. Driven by a heavy conscience and the desire to rid herself of a burden she had carried for over half a decade, Sarah decided to tell the truth. Sarah revealed to investigators that the entire alibi had been an elaborate fabrication designed to shield a calculated assassination plot. She explained that in 1991, she, her boyfriend Paul Evans, and their friend Donna Waddle were young, unemployed, and struggling to pay rent. Connie, who was older and highly influential over the group, had approached them with a proposition. Recognizing their financial desperation, Connie offered to share the proceeds of the $120,000 life insurance policy if they helped her eliminate Alan. The plan was remarkably cold and detailed. Paul Evans was selected to carry out the deed, but the group lacked a firearm. Donna Waddles solved this problem by breaking into her parents' home and stealing her father's .38 caliber revolver from beneath his mattress. On the night of the crime, the group attended the county fair to establish a visible presence and build their alibi. Later in the evening, Donna and Sarah drove Paul back to the trailer, while Connie remained at the fair to ensure she was seen by others. Paul entered the trailer, unscrewed the light bulbs to blind Alan upon his return, and positioned a speaker near the door to hide behind. To mask the sound of the gunfire, he turned the stereo volume up to its maximum level. When Alan walked through the door, Paul ambushed him, firing the first shot into his back and 2 subsequent shots into his head at close range. He then ransacked the home to simulate a burglary, met up with Sarah and Donna, and discarded the weapon into a local canal. With this explosive confession, investigators finally had the breakthrough they needed, but they still required corroborating evidence to secure a conviction. They began by contacting Donna Waddell's father, who confirmed that his .38 caliber revolver had indeed been stolen on the very day of the murder. Remarkably, the father still possessed some of the ammunition associated with the stolen firearm. Ballistics testing confirmed that this ammunition was an identical match to the bullets recovered from Alan's body. To gather direct evidence against the co-conspirators, detectives asked Sarah Thomas if she would be willing to wear a hidden recording device and speak with Donna Waddell. Demonstrating immense courage, Sarah agreed. She visited Donna S. home, claiming that the police had resumed questioning her about the old case and asking what she should do. Donna S.'s recorded response was highly revealing. She instructed Sarah to stick strictly to their original story, expressing deep regret for their actions years prior, stating that they were young and foolish, but had ultimately helped commit the act. Armed with this recording, police arrested Donna Waddell. Upon listening to the tape in the presence of her attorney, Donna realized that her denials were futile. She confessed to her role in the crime and pointed to Connie as the mastermind who had orchestrated the entire plot. The police then attempted to use the same strategy with Paul Evans. Sarah wore a wire to meet Paul at his apartment. However, Paul was far more cautious than Donna. Suspecting that he might be monitored, he refused to speak aloud. Instead, he wrote his answers on pieces of paper, showed them to Sarah, and immediately burned them. When Sarah directly challenged him, asking why he was writing if he believed she was not carrying a wire, he maintained his silent method. Fearing for Sarah's safety, the surveillance team moved in and arrested Paul, who was dressed entirely in black and maintained a defiant, uncooperative attitude before requesting legal representation. Detectives knew they had to act swiftly to apprehend Connie before news of the arrests reached her. They traveled to her remote, wooded property in Ocklawaha, Florida, which the transcript referred to as Oklahoma, Florida. When they arrived, Connie showed no surprise or emotion. Her calm demeanor suggested that she had long anticipated this day. On July 21, 1997, Connie Pfeiffer was formally arrested and charged with the murder of her husband. In the legal proceedings that followed, the justice system worked to hold each participant accountable. In exchange for her full cooperation and testimony, Donna Waddell received a plea agreement, resulting in a 10-year prison sentence. Sarah Thomas, who did not play an active role in the physical execution of the crime, and ultimately brought the truth to light, was not charged. Paul Evans was tried, found guilty of first-degree murder, and sentenced to the death penalty. Connie's trial began in 1999. Her defense attempted to argue that her young friends had acted independently out of their own financial desperation, but the combined, consistent testimonies of Donna Waddell and Sarah Thomas proved insurmountable for the jury. Throughout the trial, Connie maintained a cold, detached presence. After being found guilty of first-degree murder, she spoke publicly for the first time during the penalty phase, focusing entirely on allegations of physical abuse she claimed to have suffered during her marriage to Alan. While the prosecution sought the death penalty, The jury ultimately recommended a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, ensuring she would spend the remainder of her days behind bars. When we reflect on this tragic sequence of events, several profound psychological and sociological insights emerge. The motive for the crime was fundamentally rooted in greed, financial dependence, and a complete lack of empathy. Connie was faced with an ultimatum that threatened her comfortable lifestyle. Rather than seeking legal counsel, finding gainful employment, or accepting the reality of a dissolved marriage, she chose to view her husband's life as a financial asset to be liquidated. This mindset is unfortunately common in domestic crimes, where the perpetrator perceives the victim not as a human being with inherent value, but as an obstacle to their own personal or financial desires. The frequency of etu cases often stems from the dangerous combination of desperation and the false belief that one can orchestrate a perfect crime. Connie mistakenly believed that by utilizing younger, impressionable individuals, she could distance herself from the physical act and escape suspicion. This demonstrates a profound lack of moral character and a manipulative nature that preyed upon the vulnerability of youth. The irony of the situation lies in the very loopholes that led to their downfall. The conspirators believed that a shared secret would keep them safe. Yet, the psychological weight of guilt and the passage of time almost always erode such alliances. For the police, tracking down the perpetrators relied heavily on recognizing the anomalies at the scene and maintaining a persistent focus on the case over many years. The unscrewed light bulbs and the lack of forced entry were the initial clues that pointed to an inside job and a meticulously planned ambush. While physical evidence was scarce in the beginning, the dedication of the investigators ensured that the file remained active, allowing them to seize the opportunity when Sarah Thomas' conscience finally led her to speak. The lessons to be drawn from this tragedy are both clear and vital for any community. Trust is the foundation of any healthy relationship, but when trust begins to deteriorate, open communication and safe intervention are essential. For individuals experiencing domestic turmoil, seeking professional counseling, legal aid, or community support can prevent situations from escalating into despair or violence. Financial literacy and independence are also crucial tools that empower individuals to make healthy life choices without feeling trapped by their economic circumstances. From an investigative standpoint, the case highlights the importance of psychological profiling and the effective use of modern technology, such as covert recording devices, to secure undeniable proof. By establishing rapport with witnesses and maintaining a patient, methodical approach, law enforcement officers can dismantle even the most tightly held conspiracies. The ultimate resolution of Alan Pfeiffer's case stands as a powerful testament to the persistence of justice. It reminds us that while the truth may sometimes be obscured by time, it possesses a quiet, unstoppable force that will eventually dismantle the structures of deceit, ensuring that those who commit acts of malice are held fully accountable and that the memory of the innocent is honored and preserved. The human mind, when clouded by greed and desperation, often seeks pathways that defy logic and morality. In the quiet, family-oriented community of Vero Beach, Florida, the illusion of a peaceful suburban life was shattered in the early morning hours of late March. In the year 1991, what appeared to be a standard neighborhood disturbance quickly unraveled into a complex, multi-year investigation revealing a cold-blooded conspiracy. The case of Alan Pfeiffer serves as a profound case study in the psychology of marital discord, the destructive nature of financial desperation, and the absolute inevitability of justice when pursued by relentless investigators. By examining the motives, the forensic clues, the strategic missteps of the perpetrators, and the sophisticated methodologies of law enforcement, society can draw vital lessons to prevent such tragedies and better understand the fragile boundaries of human relationships. To understand why such tragic cases occur with disturbing frequency, one must look deep into the socioeconomic and psychological factors that govern troubled relationships. At the core of many domestic crimes lies a toxic mixture of financial dependency and emotional erosion. When a marriage deteriorates, the traditional path of divorce is often accompanied by financial anxiety. For individuals who lack independent financial security, the prospect of starting over can induce a state of intense panic. In this specific case, the mastermind behind the tragedy was faced with an ultimatum that threatened her comfortable lifestyle. Making a meager salary of only $175 a week and carrying the responsibility of raising children, the primary instigator was entirely dependent on her husband. When confronted with the reality of an impending separation, the prospect of being left with nothing pushed her toward a desperate and permanent solution. This transition from marital unhappiness to calculated violence is a dark psychological phenomenon that criminologists observe repeatedly. The introduction of life insurance policies, particularly those totaling a substantial sum, such as $120,000, often acts as a fatal catalyst. In the year 1991, such an amount represented a life-altering fortune, capable of securing property, vehicles, and long-term stability. When a partner begins to view their spouse as worth more dead than alive, the moral compass is completely overridden by material ambition. These crimes occur frequently because perpetrators often suffer from a profound cognitive bias, believing that they are clever enough to orchestrate the perfect crime. They underestimate the dedication of forensic science and the psychological weight of guilt that inevitably fractures criminal alliances. The tragic events began to unfold at approximately 4 o'clock in the morning on March 24, 1991. A local patrol officer responded to what was initially reported as a routine noise complaint at a local trailer park. Upon arriving at the residence, the officer was greeted by the blaring sound of a stereo system. Such occurrences are common in patrol work, often attributed to late-night gatherings or residents unaware of the volume of their music. However, as the officer approached the trailer, an unsettling atmosphere prevailed. Stepping inside, the officer attempted to illuminate the room by flipping the light switches, but the trailer remained plunged in absolute darkness. Relying on a flashlight, the officer began to navigate a scene of utter chaos. The interior had been thoroughly ransacked, with drawers pulled open, papers scattered across the floor, and personal belongings overturned. As the flashlight beam swept across the living room, the officer made a grisly discovery. Lying face down in front of the blaring stereo was 30-year-old Alan Pfeiffer. He was dressed in his work clothes, with his car keys lying near him, indicating that he had been attacked immediately upon entering his home. Homicide investigators soon arrived to secure the area and begin the meticulous process of gathering evidence. An autopsy would later reveal that the victim had been shot 3 times, once in the back and twice in the head, with a .38 caliber weapon. The physical layout of the crime scene provided the first major clues regarding the sophistication and the ultimate limitations of the perpetrator's plan. The most telling piece of evidence was the state of the lighting system. Investigators discovered that the light bulbs throughout the house had been carefully unscrewed. This detail was highly significant, as it proved that the intruder did not merely stumble into the victim, but rather set a deliberate and highly coordinated trap. Even if the victim had attempted to defend himself by turning on the lights, he would have remained in complete darkness, rendering him entirely vulnerable to an ambush. Furthermore, a heavy speaker had been moved near the entrance, positioned in a way that was highly consistent with someone hiding directly behind the door, waiting for the victim to step inside. Initially, the ransacked state of the trailer suggested a burglary or a robbery gone wrong. However, experienced detectives quickly noticed glaring inconsistencies that pointed away from a random crime of opportunity. The victim's wallet, containing his identification and money, remained untouched. His keys were still near him, and his vehicles, including a prize 1980 Pontiac Trans Am and a bright red Pontiac Fiero, were parked undisturbed in the driveway. There were no signs of forced entry on the doors or windows. These details strongly suggested that the killer either had access to the home or was assisted by someone who did, and that the ransacking of the property was a hasty, manufactured attempt to mislead law enforcement. The investigation took a dramatic turn when officers ran the registration plates of the vehicles parked outside. While one belonged to the victim, the other was registered to his wife, Connie Pfeiffer. This immediately raised urgent questions. The absence of the wife and her children created two distinct possibilities. Either she was another victim who had been abducted, or she was somehow involved in the crime. The police immediately launched an effort to locate her, contacting her relatives and checking local areas. Later that afternoon, at approximately 1:16 in the afternoon, Connie Pfeiffer arrived at the police station, accompanied by her mother. She appeared deeply distraught, weeping openly at the news of her husband's demise. When questioned about her whereabouts during the fateful hours of the crime, she provided a seemingly airtight alibi. She claimed that she had spent the evening at the county fair with 3 close friends, identified as Paul Evans, Sarah Thomas, and Donna Waddle, before staying overnight with acquaintances. Detectives immediately sought out and interviewed these 3 individuals. To the frustration of the investigators, the stories provided by the friends matched perfectly, confirming her presence at the fair and validating her timeline. Despite the corroborated alibi, detectives remained highly suspicious. They turned their attention to the victim's personal life, seeking a potential motive. They soon uncovered rumors of marital instability and extramarital affairs. Neighbors reported frequent and intense arguments between the couple. Some suggested that the victim had been involved with another woman, raising the possibility of a crime of passion or a love triangle. Investigators tracked down the girlfriend, June, who cooperated fully. She revealed that her relationship with the victim was serious and that he had recently given his wife a strict ultimatum to move out of the home within a week. This revelation shifted the focus back to the wife, as it established a powerful motive. If the couple divorced, the wife would be left with virtually nothing, whereas her status as a spouse guaranteed her access to the newly acquired $120,000 life insurance policies. Despite these compelling theories, the police lacked physical evidence. There were no fingerprints, no DNA connections, and the murder weapon had not been recovered. The case slowly began to stall, transitioning into a cold case. Over the next 6 years, the wife collected the insurance proceeds, relocated several hours away to Ocala, Florida, and purchased a large tract of land. To the casual observer, it appeared that the perpetrators had successfully executed their plan and escaped consequences. However, the detectives of the Vero Beach Police Department refused to let the file gather dust, maintaining contact with the victim's grieving family and waiting for the inevitable crack in the conspiracy. That break finally arrived in the year 1997, 6 years after the crime. The psychological burden of harboring such a dark secret proved too heavy for one of the accomplices, Sarah Thomas. Driven by a desire to clear her conscience, stepped forward to reveal the truth to the authorities. Her confession blew the case wide open and exposed the sheer desperation and manipulation that facilitated the crime. According to her detailed statement, the entire plan was masterminded by the wife, who used her maturity and financial promises to influence her younger, impressionable friends. At the time, Sarah Thomas, Paul Evans, and Donna Waddell were living together, struggling severely to make ends meet and barely able to afford their rent. The wife offered to resolve all of their financial difficulties in exchange for their assistance in eliminating her husband. The promise of cars, property, and a share of the insurance money was highly alluring to the cash-strapped youth. The conspiracy was highly coordinated. On the day of the murder, Donna Waddell and Paul Evans broke into the home of Donna S. father to steal a .38 caliber revolver that he kept hidden under his mattress. To establish the necessary alibis, the group planned a trip to the county fair, where they made sure to be seen. While the women remained at the fair to maintain the illusion, Paul Evans was driven back to the trailer. He entered the home, unscrewed the light bulbs to ensure complete tactical advantage, turned the stereo to a deafening volume to drown out the sounds of the struggle, and hid behind the door. When the victim arrived home from work, he was instantly ambushed in the dark. After committing the act, the shooter ransacked the home to simulate a robbery and was later picked up by his accomplices, who drove to a remote canal to discard the weapon. Armed with this detailed confession, investigators faced the challenge of corroborating Sarah S.'s testimony to ensure a conviction in a court of law. They utilized highly sophisticated police methodologies, demonstrating the strategic patience required to break a criminal conspiracy. First, they verified that Donna S. father had indeed reported a .38 caliber revolver stolen on the exact day of the homicide. Detectives visited the father, who provided matching ammunition from the same batch. Forensic crime laboratories successfully matched this ammunition to the projectiles recovered from the victim's body, establishing a direct physical link. Next, detectives utilized undercover audio surveillance. They secured the cooperation of Sarah Thomas, who agreed to wear a hidden recording device and engage Donna Waddell in conversation. Outside the residence, police monitored the interaction from a surveillance van. Sarah initiated the conversation by claiming that detectives were renewing their questioning and asking what she should do. Donna immediately took the bait, advising her to stick to the original story. In a crucial moment of emotional vulnerability, Donna expressed deep regret, stating that they were young and foolish and wished they had never assisted in the act. This recorded admission provided the absolute proof needed to secure Donna's arrest. Faced with the recording, Donna's legal counsel recognized the strength of the state's case, and she agreed to a plea deal, receiving a 10-year sentence in exchange for her full cooperation and testimony against the remaining conspirators. The police then attempted a similar sting operation against the suspected shooter, Paul Evans. However, he proved to be far more cautious. During a monitored meeting with Sarah, he refused to speak aloud, suspecting that she might be wearing a wire. Instead, he wrote his responses on pieces of paper and immediately burned them. Despite his tactical caution, the cumulative evidence and the detailed statements from his co-conspirators were more than enough to justify his arrest. When police raided his apartment, they found him sitting in a highly defensive, curled position, appearing as though he knew the day of reckoning had finally arrived. With 3 of the conspirators in custody, detectives traveled to the wooded property in Ocala to arrest the mastermind. When confronted by law enforcement, she exhibited no surprise or emotion, suggesting she had lived the past 6 years in constant anticipation of her arrest. Her trial in the year 1999 brought the tragic saga to a close. While the shooter was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to the death penalty, the mastermind was also found guilty of first-degree murder. During the penalty phase, she broke her long silence to allege a history of domestic abuse, a claim that the victim's family strongly disputed, viewing it as a final manipulative attempt to escape justice. The jury ultimately recommended a life sentence, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The resolution of this case offers profound life lessons and warnings to the community. It highlights the absolute futility of attempting to solve personal or financial problems through violence. The perpetrators of this crime believed that a clever alibi, a loud stereo, and a remote canal would protect them from discovery. However, they failed to account for the human element. A conspiracy is only as strong as its weakest link, and the psychological burden of taking a human life almost always guarantees that someone will eventually speak. For young people, this case serves as a stark warning against being manipulated by older, dominant personalities who offer easy financial solutions in exchange for illegal acts. True security and prosperity can never be built on the suffering of others. Furthermore, this case underscores the vital importance of the dedication of law enforcement. The investigators who kept this file active for 6 long years demonstrate that time does not diminish the pursuit of justice. By utilizing strategic patience, advanced forensic technology, and sophisticated psychological tactics, they successfully dismantled a complex conspiracy. For families who have lost loved ones to senseless violence, this story offers a sense of hope, proving that even when a case goes cold, the truth has a powerful way of coming to light, and those who commit such acts will eventually have to answer for their crimes. Human nature is a complex tapestry woven from various desires, aspirations, and moral choices. Within this tapestry, the dark threads of greed and desperation occasionally weave patterns of tragedy that disrupt the peaceful existence of ordinary communities. When individuals choose to abandon ethical boundaries in pursuit of material gain, the consequences are often devastating, leaving behind a wake of grief and unanswered questions. Among the most perplexing and troubling of these occurrences are crimes committed within the domestic sphere, where the sacred bond of trust is shattered for financial profit. To understand why these tragic cases happen with a disturbing frequency, one must examine the psychological underpinnings of greed, the vulnerability of young minds to manipulation, and the systemic challenges faced by law enforcement in unraveling complex conspiracies. Financial gain remains one of the most common motives in criminal history. The desire for a comfortable lifestyle, free from the burdens of debt and labor, can become an obsessive force when combined with a lack of personal responsibility. In many instances, individuals facing financial instability or the prospect of a dramatic change in their socioeconomic status feel trapped. Instead of seeking constructive solutions, such as education, employment, or legal separation, some choose a destructive path, viewing the lives of others as mere obstacles or commodities to be traded for monetary compensation. This objectification of human life is a defining characteristic of criminal masterminds who orchestrate violence from behind the scenes, leaving others to carry out the physical acts while they attempt to remain insulated from the consequences. The frequency of these cases is often exacerbated by the false belief that a carefully planned deception can outsmart the collective efforts of law enforcement. Criminals frequently underestimate the dedication, scientific tools, and persistence of investigators who are committed to bringing truth to light. Furthermore, these tragedies often involve the exploitation of impressionable young people who lack the maturity to foresee the long-term consequences of their actions. Peer pressure, financial desperation, and the influence of a dominant charismatic figure can easily lead vulnerable individuals down a path of complicity, turning what might have been minor personal struggles into lifetime tragedies of incarceration and regret. In tracking down the perpetrators of such intricate crimes, investigators rely on a combination of physical evidence, behavioral analysis, and the inevitable psychological wear and rate that occurs among co-conspirators over time. A crime scene is rarely as simple as it initially appears. Even when attempts are made to stage a robbery or create a false narrative, the physical reality of the scene often contradicts the fabricated story. Subtle details, such as the absence of forced entry, the selective nature of what was taken or left behind, and the deliberate manipulation of the environment, provide crucial clues that direct investigators toward the truth. In the pursuit of justice, patience is often the most powerful tool, as the burden of carrying a dark secret eventually becomes too heavy for some accomplices to bear, leading to confessions that break even the coldest cases wide open. To understand the practical application of these principles, one can examine the quiet community of Vero Beach, Florida, which was shaken by a sudden act of violence in the early hours of March 24, 1991. While most of the residents of the local trailer park were asleep, a noise complaint was made regarding a loud stereo blaring from one of the residences. A patrol officer responded to what seemed to be a routine disturbance, arriving at approximately 4 in the morning. Expecting perhaps a late-night party or a resident unaware of the volume, the officer approached the trailer. The loud music vibrated through the structure, yet there was no other sign of activity. Upon entering the trailer, the officer attempted to turn on the lights, but the switches yielded only darkness. Utilizing a flashlight to pierce the gloom, the officer stepped into a scene of apparent chaos. The interior of the home had been ransacked, with papers strewn across the floor, drawers pulled open, and various items overturned. As the beam of the flashlight swept across the room, it revealed a tragic sight. A man was lying face down on the floor in front of the stereo system, surrounded by a pool of blood. A pack of cigarettes lay near his hand, and he was still dressed in his work clothes, with his car keys nearby, suggesting he had only recently returned home. The officer immediately secured the premises and called for backup, initiating a homicide investigation that would span several years. When investigators arrived to process the scene, they quickly realized that the initial appearance of a burglary gone wrong did not align with the physical evidence. Although the home had been tossed, the victim's wallet, keys, and vehicle were still present at the scene. Furthermore, there was no sign of forced entry. The front door had not been pried open, and the windows were intact. This suggested that either the victim had let the assailant inside, or the assailant already possessed a means of entry. A closer examination of the lighting system revealed a highly deliberate act of preparation. The light bulbs throughout the living area had been carefully unscrewed just enough to prevent them from functioning. This meant that when the victim entered his home in the dead of night, he was thrust into total darkness, unable to illuminate the room to see the danger waiting for him. A large speaker had also been moved near the entrance, positioned in a manner consistent with someone hiding directly behind the door to launch an ambush. The victim was identified through his driver's license as 30-year-old Alan Pfeiffer. An autopsy later confirmed that Alan Pfeiffer had been shot 3 times, once in the back and twice in the head, with ammunition identified as .38 caliber. The lack of a murder weapon at the scene left investigators with few physical leads, prompting them to look closely at the personal life of the deceased. Outside the residence, 2 vehicles were parked in the driveway, a Pontiac Trans Am and a bright red Pontiac Fiero. Registration checks revealed that the Trans Am belonged to Alan, while the Fiero was registered to his wife, Connie Pfeiffer. The absence of Connie and her children from the home raised immediate concerns for their safety, as investigators wondered if they had also fallen victim to the assailant or had been taken against their will. To understand the context of the relationship between Alan and Connie, investigators began to piece together Alan's life story. Born on May 19, 1960, in Norfolk, Virginia, Alan Frederick Pfeiffer was the oldest of 2 children raised by Judith and Ronald Pfeiffer. His father was in the Navy, and after a divorce, his mother relocated Alan and his sister Cheryl to her home state of Michigan. Growing up in the lakefront town of Pinconning, Alan developed a strong sense of independence and a passion for mechanical work. He spent hours in his stepfather's garage displaying a natural talent for repairing and modifying vehicles. His greatest pride was a 1980 Pontiac Trans Am, which he personally converted from an automatic to a 4-speed manual transmission. At the age of 17, seeking independence and a reprieve from the cold northern winters, Alan moved to Vero Beach, Florida. He found employment at a local electronics store, where his intimidating presence and mechanical skills made him highly effective at repossessing property. By the mid-1980s, Alan had established a stable life and met Connie Evers, a woman they kept a hat, 2 young boys from a previous relationship. To those who knew them, Connie appeared warm, approachable, and possessing a gentle Southern charm. The couple married in 1986, embarking on what initially seemed to be a happy and supportive partnership. However, by 1991, the marriage had deteriorated significantly. Neighbors reported frequent and intense arguments between the couple, and rumors of marital infidelity began to surface. Some suspected that Alan had been seeing another woman, leading to speculation about a potential love triangle or a crime of passion driven by jealousy. Despite these rumors, investigators were still left with the primary question of Connie's whereabouts. The search for Connie ended on the afternoon of March 24, 1991, when she arrived at the police department. Accompanied by her mother, Connie appeared deeply distraught and tearful, expressing shock at the news of her husband's death. When questioned about her whereabouts during the night of the murder, Connie explained that she had taken her children to her mother's residence and had spent the evening at the county fair with 3 friends, Paul Evans, Sarah Thomas, and Donna Waddle. She claimed she had stayed with friends afterward, fearing to return home due to the ongoing tension in her marriage. Investigators verified Connie's alibi by contacting the 3 friends she had named. All 3 individuals provided consistent stories, confirming that they had been with Connie at the fair and that she had not returned to the trailer that night. Connie also described her marriage as highly strained, alleging that Alan could be emotionally cruel and had engaged in multiple extramarital affairs. She pointed investigators toward a woman named June, whom she identified as Alan's current girlfriend, suggesting that a jealous partner might have had a motive to harm him. Detectives located June and interviewed her regarding her relationship with Alan. June admitted to the affair, but strongly denied any involvement in the crime, providing a verified alibi that she was at work during the hours when the shooting occurred. June offered a different perspective on the marital dynamics, stating that Alan and Connie were on the verge of a divorce and that Alan had recently given Connie a 1-week ultimatum to move out of the trailer. June suggested that Connie was desperate, as she earned only $175 a week and was entirely dependent on Alan for financial support. This financial angle led investigators to examine the couple's financial records, where they discovered that 2 life insurance policies totaling $120,000 had been taken out on Alan's life approximately 1 month before his death. A crucial clause in the policies stipulated that the couple must be married for Connie to collect the benefits. If they divorced, Connie would receive nothing. This provided a compelling motive, as Alan was worth far more to Connie deceased than alive. However, with a solid alibi supported by 3 witnesses, investigators lacked the physical evidence necessary to make an arrest. As months turned into years, the case grew cold. Connie collected the insurance proceeds and relocated to Ocala, Florida, where she purchased a large plot of land and lived quietly. Alan's family remained in regular contact with law enforcement, hoping for a breakthrough, but fearing that justice might never be served. For 6 years, the investigation remained stalled until 1997, when a witness conscience finally led to a dramatic breakthrough. Sarah Thomas, one of the 3 friends who had provided Connie's alibi, contacted the police to make a confession. Filled by hot guilt over her involvement, Sarah revealed that the alibi had been entirely fabricated to cover up a cold-blooded conspiracy. According to Sarah, Connie had been terrified of being left destitute by the impending divorce and had approached her friends with a proposition. If they helped her remove Alan from the equation, she promised to compensate them handsomely using the insurance money. The plan was highly structured. Paul Evans, who was Sarah's boyfriend at the time, was recruited to perform the physical act, while Sarah and Donna Waddle assisted in securing a weapon and establishing the alibi. Donna knew that her father kept a .38 caliber revolver hidden under a mattress at his home. On the day of the murder, Donna and Paul broke into the residence and stole the firearm. To establish the alibi, the group went to the county fair to be seen by the public. While Connie remained at the fair to maintain her presence, Donna and Sarah drove Paul back to the trailer. Paul, dressed in dark clothing, entered the residence, unscrewed the light bulbs, turned the stereo volume up to drown out any noise, and waited behind the door. When Alan entered the dark trailer, Paul ambushed him, shooting him once in the back and twice more in the head at close range. Paul then ransacked the home to simulate a burglary, met up with Donna and Sarah, and disposed of the murder weapon in a nearby canal. To secure sufficient evidence for a conviction, investigators initiated a series of controlled operations. They confirmed that Donna S. father had indeed reported a .38 caliber revolver stolen on the day of the homicide. Investigators obtained matching ammunition from the father's home, which the crime lab confirmed was identical to the projectiles recovered from the victim. Next, investigators asked Sarah to wear a concealed recording device and initiate a conversation with Donna. During the recorded meeting, Sarah expressed anxiety about police questioning, prompting Donna to advise her to remain silent and stick to the established story. Donna S. recorded statements, including an admission of regret for their youthful foolishness, provided the leverage investigators needed. Upon being arrested and presented with the recording, Donna confessed to her role in the conspiracy and implicated Connie as the mastermind. A second recording operation was attempted with Paul Evans, but he proved to be highly cautious. Suspecting he might be monitored, Paul refused to speak aloud, choosing instead to write his answers on paper and immediately burn them. Despite his precautions, the combined confessions of Sarah and Donna, along with the physical evidence of the stolen weapon and ammunition, provided sufficient grounds for his arrest. On July 21, 1997, investigators traveled to Ocala, Florida, to arrest Connie Pfeiffer. When confronted by law enforcement in her remote home, Connie showed no signs of surprise or emotion, quietly requesting legal representation. In exchange for her testimony, Donna Waddell accepted a plea deal resulting in a 10-year prison sentence, while Sarah Thomas was not charged due to her cooperation and lack of direct involvement in the physical act of the murder. Paul Evans was prosecuted for first-degree murder, found guilty, and sentenced to death. Connie's trial took place in 1999, where her defense attempted to portray her friends as independent actors who committed the crime for financial gain without her knowledge. However, the testimony of Donna and Sarah successfully demonstrated her role as the director of the conspiracy. Connie was found guilty of first-degree murder. Although the prosecution sought the death penalty, the jury recommended a life sentence after Connie testified about alleged physical abuse in her marriage. Connie was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The resolution of this case offers profound lessons for Bayoteh Hat communities and law enforcement. For the public, it serves as a stark warning about the destructive nature of greed and the tragic consequences of manipulating others for personal gain. It highlights the importance of recognizing the signs of toxic relationships and seeking legal and peaceful means of resolution rather than resorting to violence. For law enforcement, the case underscores the value of persistence, careful analytical thinking, and the strategic use of modern technology to uncover long-hidden truths. The memory of Alan Pfeiffer remains a reminder of the enduring importance of justice and the relentless efforts of those sworn to protect the innocent. The quiet, tree-lined streets of Vero Beach, Florida, have long been associated with the peaceful rhythms of coastal life, where families seek refuge from the frantic pace of larger metropolitan areas and retirees enjoy the gentle ocean breezes. In such close-knit communities, residents often harbor a deep sense of security, believing that the troubles of the wider world will stop at their borders. Yet, history repeatedly demonstrates that the veneer of safety can be shattered in an instant, often from within the very households that seem most secure. On a spring night in the year 1991, this illusion of safety was permanently broken for the residents of a local trailer park, setting off a complex legal and investigative journey that would span nearly a decade. The tragedy began to unfold in the deep stillness of the early morning hours. On March 24, 1991, while the vast majority of the community was sound asleep, at approximately 4 in the morning, a late-night patrol officer with the local police department received ve kep hatate appeared to be a routine dispatch. The call had been placed to the 911 emergency line by a frustrated neighbor complaining about a noise disturbance coming from a nearby residence. For patrol officers, noise complaints are among the most common and predictable calls of the night shift, usually requiring nothing more than a polite request to turn down a television, end a loud conversation, or lower the volume of a stereo. When the responding patrolman arrived at the trailer park, the silence of the pre-dawn hours was indeed being disrupted by the loud, rhythmic thumping of a stereo blaring from one of the homes. The volume was so intense that it seemed unusual, even for a late-night gathering, vibrating through the thin walls of the neighboring structures. The officer parked his patrol vehicle and approached the residence, expecting to find perhaps a group of late-night partygoers who had lost track of time, or an individual who simply did not realize how far the sound of their music was carrying through the night air. As the officers stood on the steps and knocked, there was no response from within, despite the deafening music. Attempting to make contact, the officer opened the door and stepped inside, immediately reaching for the wall switch to illuminate the interior. However, flipping the switch yielded no results. The living space remained cast in heavy shadow. Recognizing that something was amiss, the officer unholstered his flashlight, casting a bright, narrow beam of light across the room. The sight that met his eyes was far from a typical weekend gathering. The interior of the trailer was in a state of utter disarray, suggesting a struggle or a frantic search. Papers were scattered across the floor, drawers had been pulled open with their contents dumped out, and various personal items had been overturned. The scene bore all the hallmarks of a residence that had been thoroughly ransacked. As the officer advanced further into the darkened home, guided only by the beam of his flashlight, he discovered a male figure lying motionless on the floor in front of the stereo system, surrounded by a pool of blood. Nearby, a simple pack of cigarettes lay on the carpet. Recognizing the gravity of the situation and the clear signs of a violent crime, the patrol officer immediately retreated to secure the perimeter and radioed for emergency medical services and homicide investigators. When the specialized detectives arrived to process the scene, they began a meticulous documentation of the evidence. The victim was found dressed in his work attire, with his car keys lying near his body, indicating that he had likely returned home from his job when he was confronted. An examination of the physical evidence revealed that the victim had been shot 3 times, once in the back and twice in the head, leaving no doubt that this was an intentional and coordinated act of violence. The medical examiner would later confirm that the nature of the wounds made survival impossible. As investigators began to analyze the geometry of the room, they noticed a significant detail. A large speaker had been moved near the main entrance, positioned in a way that would allow an assailant to hide directly behind the door as it opened. This physical configurations suggested a calculated ambush, designed to catch the victim entirely off guard the moment he stepped across his own threshold. A search of the victim S wallet revealed a driver S license that identified him as 30-year-old Alan Frederick Pfeiffer. At first glance, the ransacked state of the home led investigators to consider the possibility of a burglary or a robbery that had gone tragically wrong. However, several key details quickly cast doubt on this theory. Alan's wallet containing cash and credit cards had been left untouched. His car keys remained on the floor, and his vehicle was still parked outside. Furthermore, there was absolutely no sign of forced entry on the doors or windows. The most telling clue regarding the premeditated nature of the crime was discovered when investigators examined the lighting fixtures. Every single light bulb in the active areas of the house had been carefully unscrewed just enough to prevent them from receiving electrical current. This meant that when Alan arrived home in the dead of night and flipped the light switches, he was plunged into total darkness, rendering him unable to see his attacker or defend himself. He had been lured into a dark trap in his own living room. Outside the residence, detectives noted two vehicles parked in the driveway, a Pontiac Trans Am and a bright red Pontiac Fiero. A registration check revealed that the Trans Am belonged to Alan, while the Fiero was registered to his wife, Connie Pfeiffer. This discovery immediately raised urgent questions. If Alan had been targeted in his home, where was his wife, and were the children safe? The potential for additional victims weighed heavily on the minds of the responding officers, prompting them to initiate a search for Connie and her family. To understand the circumstances surrounding the tragedy, investigators began to piece together the history of Alan Frederick Pfeiffer. Born on May 19, 1960, in Norfolk, Virginia, Alan was the oldest of two children born to Judith and Ronald Pfeiffer. Due to his biological father's service in the Navy, Alan's early years were spent in Virginia before his parents divorced, leading his mother to relocate Alan and his sister Cheryl back to her home state of Michigan. Growing up in the lakefront town of Pinconning, Michigan, Alan developed a reputation as a highly independent and mechanically minded young man. While he enjoyed outdoor activities like hunting, his true passion was found in the family garage. He possessed a natural talent for working on automobiles, a hobby that brought him immense pride. His ultimate goal during his youth was to own a 1980 Pontiac Trans Am, a vehicle he eventually acquired and meticulously modified, replacing the automatic transmission with a 4-speed manual gearbox. As relations with his stepfather became strained, 17-year-old Alan decided to seek his independence, leaving Michigan behind and heading south to the warmer climate of Vero Beach, Florida. In Florida, Alan established himself by working at a local electronics store, where his strong physical presence and confident demeanor made him highly effective at handling property repossessions. By the mid-1980s, he was earning a comfortable living and had met a young woman named Connie Evers. To those who knew them at the time, Connie appeared to be a warm, approachable person with a gentle Southern charm. She was a mother of 2 young boys from a previous relationship, and though the boys did not reside with them full-time, Alan actively participated in their lives, showing a maturity that won the respect of his peers. In 1986, the couple married in a ceremony that friends and family remembered as joyful and filled with genuine affection. Yet, 5 years after that promising beginning, Alan lay dead, and his family was left to grapple with the shocking reality of his sudden passing. As detectives contacted Connie's relatives, including her mother and brother, they found no immediate answers regarding her whereabouts. Alan's mother and sister, back in Michigan, were devastated by the news, recalling the profound shock of receiving the phone call on a quiet Sunday morning. The mystery of Connie's whereabouts was resolved later that afternoon, at approximately 1:16 in the afternoon, on March 24th, when she arrived at the police department, accompanied by her mother. Connie appeared visibly distraught and overwhelmed by grief, expressing absolute shock at the news of her husband's death. When questioned by investigators about her location during the night, she explained that she had taken her children to her mother's house, spent the evening attending the local county fair with friends, and subsequently stayed overnight at a friend's residence. To support her account, Connie provided the names of 3 friends who had accompanied her to the fair: Paul Evans, Sarah Thomas, and Donna Waddle. When detectives contacted these individuals, their statements matched Connie's timeline, seemingly providing her with a solid alibi for the hours during which the murder occurred. When asked about the state of her marriage, Connie painted a picture of a relationship that had deteriorated significantly. She claimed that Alan could be verbally harsh and cruel, and she confirmed rumors that he had engaged in several extramarital affairs over the years. According to Connie, Alan's current girlfriend, a woman named June, had become increasingly persistent and refused to end the relationship. This information opened new avenues of inquiry for the detectives, who began to consider whether the crime was the result of a jealous love triangle or a spurned lover. Investigators quickly located June to verify her whereabouts on the night of the crime. June cooperated fully, explaining that while she and Alan had been seeing Iage hot other, and she had hoped he would leave his wife, she had no involvement in his death. Her alibi was easily verified, as she had been working her shift at most the time of the shooting. Crucially, June provided detectives with a very different perspective on the dynamics between Alan and Connie. She revealed that the marriage was on the verge of collapse and that Alan had recently issued a strict ultimatum to Connie, demanding that she pack her belongings and vacate the home within 1 week. This detail shifted the focus of the investigation back toward Connie's possible motives. A review of Connie's background revealed no prior criminal history, but financial records uncovered a highly significant piece of information. Just 1 month prior to the homicide, the couple had taken out 2 life insurance policies on Alan's life, with a combined value of $120,000. In the year 1991, this represented a substantial sum of money. Furthermore, the terms of the policies dictated that the couple had to remain legally married for Connie to collect the benefits. If Alan divorced her, as he had threatened to do, Connie would be left with virtually no financial resources, as her weekly income from a part-time job was only $175, and she did not even own the vehicle she drove. To the homicide investigators, this financial pressure provided a powerful and compelling motive. If Alan were to die while they were still married, Connie would secure her financial future, acquire the trailer, the sports cars, and a significant cash payout. If she allowed the divorce to proceed, she faced the prospect of poverty and instability for herself and her children. Despite this compelling theory, investigators faced a major obstacle. They lacked any physical evidence linking Connie to the crime, and her alibi remained intact, supported by 3 cooperative witnesses. Over the next several months, detectives worked tirelessly to find a breakthrough, conducting hundreds of interviews. The kept to hot neighbors, co-workers, family members, and associates. Yet, without a murder weapon, fingerprints, or genetic evidence, the case gradually stalled. As the months turned into years, Connie collected the $120,000 in life insurance proceeds and relocated several hours away to Ocala, Florida, where she purchased a large tract of land and established a new life. For 6 long years, the case remained unresolved, classified as a cold case. Alan S. family in Michigan continued to hope for justice, frequently calling the department for updates, while investigators refused to let the file be forgotten. The breakthrough finally arrived in the year 1997, driven by the heavy burden of guilt carried by one of the original alibi witnesses. Sarah Thomas, who had been a teenager at the time of the murder, approached the police to make a full confession, seeking to lift the weight of the secret she had kept for 6 years. During her voluntary interview with detectives, Sarah revealed the details of a cold-blooded and calculated conspiracy that had been orchestrated by Connie Pfeiffer. According to Sarah, the rumors of the impending divorce were entirely accurate. Connie was terrified of being left with nothing and decided that Alan was worth far more to her dead than alive. Recognizing that she could not execute the plan alone, Connie turned to her young friends, Paul Evans, Sarah Thomas, and Donna Waddell, who were living together and struggling to make ends meet. Connie offered to share the financial rewards of the insurance payout if they assisted her in eliminating her husband. The plan was remarkably detailed. Paul Evans, who was Sarah's boyfriend at the time, was selected to carry out the shooting. Because the group lacked a firearm, Donna Waddell suggested stealing a .38 caliber revolver that her father kept hidden under his mattress. On the day of the murder, Donna and Paul broke into her parents' home and secured the weapon. To establish an undeniable alibi, Connie, Donna, and Sarah went to the county fair, ensuring they were seen by numerous people. While at the fair, Donna and Sarah drove Paul back to the trailer, where he slipped inside and prepared the ambush. To mask the sound of the gunshots, Paul moved a speaker near the entrance, turned the stereo volume to its maximum level, and unscrewed the light bulbs. He then waited in the darkness. When Alan arrived home from work, he entered the dark trailer and was immediately ambushed by Paul, who fired the first shot into his back. As Alan fell, Paul stood over him and fired 2 additional shots into his head at close range. Paul then staged the ransacking of the trailer to mimic a burglary, met up with the others at a prearranged location, and later disposed of the murder weapon by throwing it into a local canal. While Sarah's detailed confession provided investigators with the narrative structure of the crime, they knew that a conviction would require independent corroboration. Detectives immediately visited Donna Waddell's father, who confirmed that his .38 caliber revolver had indeed been stolen on the very day of the homicide. Crucially, the father still possessed spare ammunition from the same batch as the stolen gun. Forensic analysts at the crime lab compared this ammunition with the bullets recovered from Alan S.'s body, confirming an exact ballistic match. To secure further evidence, investigators devised a tactical sting operation. They asked Sarah Thomas to wear a concealed recording device and initiate a conversation with Donna Waddell. Sarah agreed, meeting Donna at her home under the pretense that the police had begun reinvestigating the case and were asking questions. As detectives listened from a nearby surveillance van, Sarah expressed panic, asking Donna what she should do. Donna advised her to remain calm and stick to the original alibi, stating that the authorities could do nothing as long as they maintained their story. In a crucial moment of reflection, Donna added that she thought about the incident constantly, expressing deep regret for their youthful foolishness and wishing they had never agreed to help. With this recorded admission, officers arrested Donna Waddell. Confronted with the recording in the presence of her attorney, Donna realized the evidence against her was insurmountable. She provided a full confession that mirrored Sarah S.'s account, solidifying Connie S.'s role as the mastermind who had manipulated the younger group members into executing the plot. Armed with 2 confessions, investigators sought to capture a recording of Paul Evans. Sarah agreed to wear a wire once more and met with Paul at his apartment complex, while police positioned surveillance units around the property. However, Paul proved to be far more cautious than Donna. Suspecting he might be monitored, he refused to speak aloud, choosing instead to write his answers on a piece of paper, show them to Sarah, and immediately burn the paper. Despite his silence, detectives intervened, arresting Paul and charging him with first-degree murder. Upon his arrest, his defiant demeanor suggested a quiet resignation that his past had finally caught up with him. To prevent Connie from learning of the arrests and fleeing, detectives immediately drove to her remote property in Ocala, Florida. When they arrived, Connie showed no surprise or emotion, looking at the officers as though she had anticipated their arrival for 6 years. She was arrested on July 21, 1997, and immediately invoked her right to counsel. In exchange for her cooperation, Donna Waddell received a plea agreement resulting in a 10-year prison sentence, while Sarah Thomas was not charged due to her limited, nonviolent role and her essential assistance in solving the case. Paul Evans was prosecuted for first-degree murder, found guilty, and sentenced to the death penalty. Connie Pfeiffer S. trial began in the year 1999. Her defense attempted to argue that her young friends had acted independently out of their own financial desperation. But the combined testimonies of Donna Waddell and Sarah Thomas proved devastating to her case. The jury found Connie guilty of first-degree murder. During the penalty phase, she spoke publicly for the first time, offering detailed accounts of physical abuse she claimed to have suffered during the marriage. Ultimately, the jury recommended a sentence of life imprisonment, and the judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. An analysis of this case reveals several critical insights into the nature of such crimes. The primary driver in this tragedy was financial dependency, coupled vette, hat extreme greed. Connie faced a situation where her comfortable lifestyle was threatened by an impending divorce. Rather than seeking a lawful separation and building an independent life, she viewed her husband as a financial asset to be liquidated. This psychological transition, where a spouse is reduced to a monetary value, is a recurring theme in contract-style homicides. The frequency of these cases often stems from the misconception that a carefully constructed alibi and the delegation of the physical act to others will insulate the instigator from justice. Criminal masterminds often exhibit a high degree of manipulation, targeting younger, impressionable, or financially desperate individuals who are easily influenced by promises of wealth or security. In this case, Connie utilized her age and relative stability to influence a group of struggling teenagers, convincing them to risk their lives and freedom for a share of the insurance proceeds. The key details that allowed law enforcement to eventually solve this case highlight the limitations of even the most carefully planned criminal plots. First, the physical evidence at the crime scene immediately contradicted the staged narrative of a robbery. The lack of forced entry, the untouched valuables, and the meticulously unscrewed light bulbs pointed directly to an inside job and a targeted ambush. Second, the reliance on multiple accomplices is almost always a fatal flaw in any conspiracy. The psychological burden of harboring a secret involving a loss of life is immense, and over time, relationships change, consciences weigh heavily, and the fear of exposure increases. The police department's persistence in keeping the investigation active ensured that when Sarah Thomas's conscience finally yielded, there was a receptive and prepared investigative team ready to act. For the community, this tragic case offers profound lessons. It underscores the critical importance of recognizing the warning signs of severe domestic discord and financial desperation. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect and open communication. When a relationship deteriorates to the point of threats, ultimatums, and extreme financial control, professional intervention, or legal separation must be sought immediately. Furthermore, this case serves as a powerful reminder of the inevitability of justice. The passage of 6 years did not erase the evidence, nor did it quiet the consciences of those involved. For law enforcement, the successful resolution of this cold case highlights the value of maintaining active files on unresolved homicides, utilizing tactical sting operations. They kept itahat, recorded conversations, and leveraging ballistic forensics to connect disparate pieces of evidence. Through patience, strategic planning, and an unwavering commitment to the truth, justice was ultimately secured for Alan Pfeiffer, and a stark warning was delivered to those who believe they can escape the consequences of their actions. The human desire for security, comfort, and financial freedom is a fundamental aspect of the shared experience. Yet, when this desire is corrupted by impatience and malice, it can lead to the deepest betrayals. The quiet, family-oriented community of Vero Beach, Florida, experienced such a betrayal in the early morning hours of March 24, 1991. This case, which began as a simple noise complaint, unfolded over several years into a complex web of conspiracy, greed, and ultimate justice, leaving profound lessons about human nature and the systems designed to protect the innocent. To understand why such tragic cases occur with disturbing frequency, one must examine the psychological and social motives that drive individuals to commit violence against those they once promised to cherish. In many domestic homicides, the primary catalyst is not a sudden fit of passion, but a calculated evaluation of worth. In this instance, the perpetrator concluded that her spouse was far more valuable to her deceased than alive. This cold assessment is often rooted in a combination of financial dependency and the fear of losing social status or material comfort. When a relationship deteriorates to the point of an impending divorce, the individual who feels economically vulnerable may experience a sense of panic. Rather than facing the difficult, albeit standard, path of legal separation and self-rebuilding, some choose the illusion of an easy escape. The presence of significant life insurance policies, such as the $120,000 policy in this case, acts as a dangerous accelerant. It transforms a desire to escape a marriage into a lucrative business transaction in the mind of the conspirator. This transition from marital discord to criminal conspiracy highlight how greed can override basic human empathy, especially when fueled by the desperation of maintaining a lifestyle that one cannot independently support. The frequency of these crimes is also sustained by a psychological phenomenon known as cognitive distortion, where the perpetrator convinces themselves that they are the true victim and that their actions are justified. By vilifying the partner, the criminal attempts to rationalize their heinous plans. In the quiet trailer park of Vero Beach, the initial scene encountered by the patrol officer at 4 o'clock in the morning seemed to suggest a burglary gone wrong. The stereo was blaring loudly, drawers were open, and papers were strewn across the floor. However, the meticulous details of the scene immediately began to tell a different story to the experienced investigators. The most telling clue was the absence of forced entry and the fact that valuable personal items, such as the victim's wallet, keys, and vehicle, remained untouched. A standard burglar seeks valuables and quick escape. They do not typically leave the most obvious treasures behind while taking the time to unscrew every light bulb in the residence. This detail of the unscrewed light bulbs was a critical piece of evidence that pointed directly to premeditation and personal betrayal. It demonstrated that the perpetrator had intimate knowledge of the home and had deliberately set a physical trap to ensure the victim, 30-year-old Alan Pfeiffer, would be left in total darkness upon his return from work. The physical layout of the scene suggested that the assailant had hidden directly behind the entrance door, waiting for the precise moment to strike. This level of preparation requires a degree of cold calculation that contrasts sharply with the chaotic nature of a typical robbery. By analyzing these subtle anomalies, investigators were able to bypass the superficial staging of a burglary and focus their efforts on the victim's personal life. The sophistication of the criminals in this case was characterized by a reliance on youthful accomplices and a carefully constructed alibi, yet it ultimately crumbled due to the inherent flaws of human nature and the passage of time. Connie Pfeiffer sought to shield herself from suspicion by utilizing 3 younger individuals, Paul Evans, Sarah Thomas, and Donna Waddell, to carry out the physical execution of the plan, while she established a seemingly solid alibi at a local county fair. This strategy represents a common tactic among masterminds who wish to distance themselves from the physical act of violence. By manipulating younger, financially desperate individuals, the organizer of the plot believed she could enjoy the financial rewards of her husband's life insurance policy without ever facing the consequences. However, the apparent sophistication of this plan was undermined by its reliance on the silence of multiple co-conspirators. In the realm of criminal justice, a secret shared among 4 people is rarely a secret for long. The passage of 6 years did not erase the psychological weight of the crime. Instead, it allowed the pressure of conscience and changing life circumstances to erode the alliance. When Sarah Thomas chose to step forward in 1997 to relieve her conscience, the entire foundation of the alibi collapsed. This highlights a fundamental truth about criminal conspiracies. They are only as strong as their weakest link, and the emotional and psychological toll of harboring such a dark secret eventually demands a resolution. The investigation that followed this breakthrough offers valuable insights into the techniques that law enforcement can utilize to resolve complex cases more rapidly. The use of strategic sting operations, such as having a cooperating witness wear a recording device, proved to be the decisive factor in securing the evidence needed for prosecution. When Sarah Thomas agreed to wear a wire and speak with Donna Waddell, the police were able to capture spontaneous, incriminating statements that no amount of standard interrogation could have produced. Donna's admission that they were young and foolish, and her expression of regret, provided the undeniable proof of complicity that physical evidence alone could not establish. This case demonstrates that when physical clues are sparse, the strategic utilization of interpersonal dynamics and the psychological pressure of guilt can be the most effective tools in an investigator's arsenal. To prevent such tragedies, communities and individuals must draw profound life lessons from this narrative. The most critical lesson is the importance of recognizing the warning signs of severe relationship breakdown and seeking safe external intervention before conflict escalates into danger. Financial control, severe jealousy, and threats of isolation are often precursors to physical harm. It is vital for individuals who find themselves in volatile or disintegrating marriages to establish independent support systems and seek professional guidance. Furthermore, the financial sector and insurance industries play a significant role in prevention by maintaining rigorous scrutiny over the issuance and modification of high-value life insurance policies, particularly when they are established shortly before a tragedy occurs. Increased communication between law enforcement and financial institutions can sometimes highlight unusual patterns of behavior before they result in violence. The dedication of the investigating officers in this case serves as a testament to the enduring pursuit of justice. For 6 years, the file remained open, a constant reminder to the detectives and the family of Alan Pfeiffer that a cold-blooded crime had left an unresolved void. The persistence of the Vero Beach Police Department ensures that even when the trail seems to go cold, the passage of time does not grant immunity to those who violate the law. The eventual conviction of the perpetrator to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and the appropriate sentencing of her accomplices, reinforces the societal truth that justice may be delayed, but it will ultimately prevail. In rewriting the narrative of this tragic event, we begin on that quiet night of March 24, 1991. The coastal air of Vero Beach was calm, and most residents of the local trailer park were asleep, anticipating the start of a new week. At approximately 4 o'clock in the morning, a late-night patrol officer received a dispatch regarding a noise complaint. Such calls are common in residential areas, usually indicating a social gathering where the music had been left playing too loud or a resident who was simply unaware of the volume. Upon arriving at the designated trailer, the officer was greeted by the booming sound of a stereo system playing at maximum volume. The sheer intensity of the sound in the stillness of the early morning immediately created an atmosphere of unease. The officer approached the dwelling and knocked, but received no response over the din of the music. Deciding to investigate further, the officer opened the door and attempted to locate a light switch to illuminate the interior. When the switches failed to produce light, the officer was forced to rely on the beam of a flashlight. The scene that was revealed was one of complete disorder. Papers were scattered across the floor, drawers had been pulled open, and various household items lay overturned as if a frantic search had taken place. As the officer navigated through the cluttered living room, the beam of the flashlight came to rest on an unresponsive male figure lying face down in front of the stereo system. A package of cigarettes lay nearby on the floor. It was immediately clear that this was not a simple disturbance of the peace, but a crime scene of the most serious nature. The officer secured the area and summoned homicide investigators to the scene. Upon their arrival, detectives began the meticulous process of documenting and collecting physical evidence. The victim was identified through his driver's license as 30-year-old Alan Pfeiffer. He was still dressed in his work attire, and his car keys were located close to his body, suggesting that he had been attacked almost immediately upon entering his home. An examination of the physical space revealed that a large speaker had been moved near the entrance. positioned in a manner that would allow an assailant to remain hidden directly behind the door. The physical evidence indicated that Allen had been shot 3 times, with 1 wound to the back and 2 to the head, suggesting a swift and decisive attack from behind. The initial theory of a burglary gone wrong quickly began to lose credibility as detectives analyzed the details. Allen's wallet containing cash and personal identification was still in his pocket. His prized possession, a 1980 Pontiac Trans Am, was parked undisturbed in the driveway alongside a red Pontiac Fiero. There were no signs of forced entry on the doors or windows. The most telling discovery, however, was the condition of the light bulbs throughout the trailer. Every single bulb had been carefully unscrewed just enough to prevent them from functioning. This detail was a clear indication of a planned ambush. Whoever had entered the trailer had done so with the specific intent of depriving Allen of light, ensuring he would be completely defenseless when he walked through the door. As the investigation turned toward the victim's personal life, detectives discovered that Allen did not live alone. The presence of female belongings indicated that his wife, Connie Pfeiffer, also resided in the home. However, she was nowhere to be found, and her sudden absence raised immediate concerns for her safety. Law enforcement agencies across the state were notified to look for her, while investigators reached out to her relatives. Allen S. family in Michigan was contacted, and they were devastated by the news. Allen S. sister, Cheryl, recalled the shock of receiving the phone call on a Sunday morning, a moment that forever altered their lives. Allen Pfeiffer had spent his youth in Pinconning, Michigan, where he developed a deep passion for mechanics and the outdoors. He was an independent young man who eventually sought to escape the cold northern winters by moving south to Florida at the age of 17. He established himself in Vero Beach, earning a living through his mechanical skills and working for an electronics store. In the mid-1980s, he met Connie Evers, a mother of 2 boys, and the couple married in 1986. To those who knew them initially, they appeared to be a happy, settled couple. However, as the years progressed, the marriage began to fracture under the weight of financial strain and mutual infidelity. On the afternoon of March 24, 1991, Connie Pfeiffer arrived at the police department accompanied by her mother. She appeared highly distraught and emotional, claiming she had only just learned of her husband's death. When questioned about her whereabouts during the night of the crime, Connie provided a detailed alibi. She stated that she had spent the evening at the county fair with 3 friends: Paul Evans, Sarah Thomas, and Donna Waddle. She explained that she had chosen not to return home that night because her relationship with Allen had become increasingly volatile, and she felt safer staying elsewhere. Detectives located and interviewed the 3 friends, all of whom verified Connie's account of the evening. They confirmed that she had been with them at the fair, and that they had spent the night together. With a seemingly airtight alibi, Connie was temporarily ruled out as a direct suspect, though investigators maintained a level of skepticism. They turned their attention to the rumors of Allen S. extramarital affairs, specifically focusing on a woman named June. When interviewed, June admitted to the relationship, but vehemently denied any involvement in the violence. She provided an alibi of her own, which was verified by her employer. June also offered a critical piece of information. Allen had recently given Connie an ultimatum, demanding that she leave the home within a week. This revelation provided a compelling motive. Connie was financially dependent on Allen, earning a modest wage that would make it difficult to support herself and her children. Further investigation into their financial records revealed that just 1 month prior to the tragedy, the couple had taken out 2 life insurance policies on Alan's life, totaling $120,000. Under the terms of the policies, Connie could only collect the proceeds if they remained married at the time of his death. If they divorced, she would receive nothing. To the investigators, the financial incentive was clear, but they lacked the physical evidence or the confession necessary to link Connie to the crime. For 6 years, the case remained unresolved. Connie collected the insurance proceeds and relocated to a large property in Ocala, Florida, moving on with her life, while Alan S. family continued to search for answers. The breakthrough finally came in 1997 when Sarah Thomas, burdened by the weight of her conscience, contacted the police. She revealed that the entire alibi had been a fabrication designed to protect a carefully orchestrated murder plot. According to Sarah, Connie had approached her and her boyfriend, Paul Evans, offering to resolve their financial difficulties if they helped her eliminate her husband. The plan was for Paul Evans to carry out the physical act while the others provided the alibi. On the day of the crime, Donna Waddle and Paul broke into Donna S. Father S. home to obtain a .38 caliber revolver. While Connie remained at the fair to be seen by potential witnesses, Donna and Sarah drove Paul to the trailer. Paul turned up the stereo to mask the sound of the gunfire and waited in the darkness for Alan to return. After the deed was completed, Paul staged the burglary and was picked up by the others, who later disposed of the weapon in a nearby canal. With this detailed confession, investigators set a series of traps to gather corroborating evidence. They obtained ammunition from Donna Waddell's father, which the crime lab confirmed matched the projectiles recovered from the scene. Sarah Thomas then agreed to wear a recording device and meet with Donna. During their conversation, Donna made several incriminating remarks, advising Sarah to stick to the story and expressing regret for their involvement when they were young. This recording was sufficient to secure Donna S.'s arrest. When presented with the recording, Donna fully cooperated with the authorities, confirming Connie S.'s role as the mastermind. An attempt to gather similar recorded evidence from Paul Evans was less successful, as he was highly cautious and wrote his responses on paper before burning them. However, with the confessions of both Sarah and Donna, the police had sufficient evidence to arrest Paul Evans and charge him with first-degree murder. They then traveled to the remote property in Ocala to arrest Connie Pfeiffer. When the officers arrived, Connie showed no signs of surprise or emotion, appearing to have expected the day would eventually come. The legal proceedings brought the tragic chapter to a close. Donna Waddle received a 10-year sentence in exchange for her cooperation, while Sarah Thomas was not charged due to her limited role and subsequent assistance. Paul Evans was tried, found guilty of first-degree murder, and sentenced to the death penalty. During Connie's trial in 1999, her defense attempted to portray her friends as the sole coordinators of the crime. But the consistent testimony of Donna and Sarah proved overwhelming for the jury. Connie was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The resolution of this case underscores the triumph of persistent investigative work over calculated deceit. It serves as a reminder that the bonds of criminal conspiracy are fragile and that justice, though it may require years of dedication, remains an unyielding force. The memory of Alan Pfeiffer continues to be honored by his family. While the lessons of his tragic loss remain a powerful warning about the devastating consequences of greed and the enduring strength of the truth.